And so when I go and I talk, I share that story with people, with first responders, especially those who are struggling. Just know we entered this profession to help people. If you lose your compassion, you gotta get some help.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Blah, Blah, Blah Something Wellness Podcast. We are into a new month, and we are now talking about spring clean your energy. And we get to go a little bit more woo-woo this month, but we will, we'll keep it dialed in, maybe. I am your host, Tami Sharp. I am joined by my partner in all things, Chris Zamora. We have a couple of special guests with us, so I will let Karen, will you please introduce yourself? And then Sarah, you can introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm Karen Hurley, and I own a business called Coaching with a Karen because I cannot deny my name nor the way that I look. And especially working in public safety, if you do not have a sense of humor, why bother? What I do is I help teams, executive leadership, and first responders reconnect to the values that are most important to them. And so it's really exciting because I am a spiritual coach. So this is really my specialty. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.
My name is Sarah Brady, and I own Thinline Consulting. I coach, I teach, and I consult within the public safety industry. Specifically, I love working with my dispatch community. I'm a retired dispatcher with law enforcement in my background, and I'm excited to be a part of the conversation. The specific type of coaching that I do is somewhere between wellness coaching and functional health coaching. So I'm certified as a functional health practitioner, and so I usually get deer in the headlights with that, but I get to run functional labs and um, cl- correlate those that information with your experience. So, and then walk out the protocols with you to optimize your health. So I'm on more of the biology side of things, but I also believe that you can't separate out the mind and body, and along with that does come the spiritual woo woo kind of stuff. So I like to play in those waters as well. So I'm excited to be here and be a part of the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I want to just say for the audience too, because I say woo woo, I drop woo woo in like every episode. Like, and I describe myself, I'm like, I can go full spectrum woo woo. But the thing is, with woo woo, it's not actually woo woo. It's a lot of it is just misconception. And that's kind of what this month is about is debunking some of the myths, some of the confusion, some of the fear around it. And also respecting all of your different beliefs. So on that note, I think what we're gonna because we are all coaches on this panel, and coaching is really, taken off within the first responder space. And when Chris and I first started this years ago, nobody really knew or understood what coaching was. And we'd always have to explain, athletes use coaches, business people, every other profession uses coaching, but law enforcement has not. And yes, there's mentorship programs, but coaching is different. And there's also some confusion. Is coaching therapy? No, it's similar ish, but it's not therapy. None of us are licensed therapists or counselors, right? Sarah, are you? You're
Yes.
not. You're legit coach. Okay. Uh, so none of us are also doctors. So, one of the first things when it comes to coaching that you, as the audience, need to know if you ever have a coach that is giving you advice, it's not a coach. Also, coaches do not prescribe. They cannot interfere with your medical practices. They shouldn't be telling you or going against what your therapist, psychiatrist, or medical professionals are telling you. So, use your own discernment to understand because a little disclaimer when it comes to coaching is not a regulated field. Anybody can say that they're a life coach. You have people popping up being like, hey, I cried last week and then I got better. So now I'm a life coach. Ha! Okay. All of us here have gone through thousands of hours of actual coach training. We are all in the first responder space. We are trying to help set the standards for coaching because every time I go on LinkedIn, there's a new coach and a new coaching company that pops up. And I'm like, that's great. Great. And I love that the departments are actually talking about it and utilizing it now, but we also need to know what to look for and the standards. So this is a long intro for this, but I want to do some disclaimers and some housekeeping for first responders when it comes to coaching. So in on that note, can we all kind of go around and they don't need to hear me talk. Will you guys kind of explain what your understanding of coaching is?
I'll go first. So for me, I did, and I love that you qualified this, right? Because we get special buzzwords, right? Wellness, coach. It seems like nobody really understands what that is. And so I did spend 3.5 years in school, and I chose to be a coach and not a therapist because of the flexibility that I have in that. And I also believe, so for me, I was a co-responder in Phoenix Fire. And I was that before they were actually a co-responder, right? It was before they had a name. And what I found was that I was very grateful to work in a large agency because I did have a lot of adult supervision in the work that I did. And so specifically, we worked in partners, and I really enjoyed that because there was a way for me to be mentored. And at the time, I didn't even really understand coached, right? It was very informal. But when it comes to coaching, what I find is that oftentimes what we're seeing, especially in first responder land, because it's not exclusive just to policing, but we wait until the wheels are so far off the track that we're going into therapy. And it really is when you start to see things going a little sideways, right? I don't want to spend decades in therapy. I've had a coach and I've been in therapy simultaneously. And for me, it was, I got tired of talking about it. I wanted to be a little more action oriented. And so while a coach doesn't necessarily give you advice, I give homework because we're going to cover and move. 'Cause my intention is never to see you over and over again, right, for years. I typically work with clients for about 6 months, and that's it, right? You may come back in at some point, but the intention is that we just work on a couple of issues, we get you to the next step, and then I want you to go integrate that into your life and see how that's working for you. And if you gotta tap back in, that's great. But if you don't, that's even better.
Well, I
Mhm.
love that you said that because if you step out of the law enforcement coaching space, I think for us, I know that we price our things according to make it work for a budget for a department. But if you step into the, personal development field and you go try to get a coach, you're gonna get some sticker shock. I have friends that literally charge $25,000. It's $500 just to do a 30-minute discovery call with them, and then they will trickle you up into their 5, 10, 15, $25,000 packages, and it's like, "Holy crap." But what you just said is coaching is action step oriented. It's not to keep you talking in your story all the time. It's like, "Okay, what's your story? Okay, now what are we going to do to get you through it?" We move you through it. And I always say that coaching is like having a personal trainer for your soul. Like it helps you. You can go and do the healing on your own. You can go to a gym and work out on your own, but if you really have a goal to hit, having that accountability partner and somebody that knows how to ask the right questions to get you to be like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." That's going to move you through everything that much faster. Sarah, what say you?
Hi, you're so fun. I just to piggyback on some of what Karen had said and what you were talking about, I really think that some of what I hear is like a you're right in that coaching is kind of like the Wild West right now. It's very unregulated, and you every day there it seems like there's new people popping up into the space, whether it's in the public safety world or outside of the public safety world. But one of the things like it kind of gets under my skin a little bit right now specifically is helping people understand the scope of practice for coaches versus clinicians versus peer support. It's this thing that I've created called NextGen Wellness. It's what if you go to my website, all I do is focus on next gen wellness and this idea of we have peer supporters, we have coaches, which is a new concept in my side of in 911. It's a very new concept. It's a not as new in the law enforcement side because of some of the work that you guys have been doing and other companies like yours that are kind of talking more about coaching and putting it out there. And then there's clinical care, and I think the scope of practice is something that's really misunderstood And I like to think about coaching as just like you guys were talking about. And I'm with you, Karen. I'm like, most of my clients are with me for 6 months, maybe a year. And then they kind of get what they need and then they move through to their next thing. And they sometimes they come back and sometimes they don't, and that's okay. Like there's no like they get to re-up with me whenever they want. I'm still here. But when we it is a very action coaching to me is a very action oriented space where we're staying in the here and now. We're not digging into like the things that brought you here necessarily. We're working through like, well, how do we make this functional? How do we get you what do you need to keep moving forward? What's your current space? What's your A and what's your B and how are we going to get there? And like to me that's very different than someone who's in clinical care who like the clinician is trained and it's within their scope of practice to take you back into those spaces, those wounds that are still left, unhealed, unworked through, that are contributing to where you are today for sure, because that's the way wounds work. If you don't go back and do the healing work, then it just keeps coming up until you do. That's kind of the universe's way of saying you got to fix your shit. um, but clinicians have been trained in a variety of different modalities and a variety of different ways to safely walk you through like that healing process. And there is a time and a place for a coach to help you keep moving through. And it's more, to me, I view coaching as very holistic. Like your clinician, if your clinician is talking to you about nutrition and supplements and exercise, they're kind of outside the scope of their practice. Like, I'm not to say that they can't, like, touch on those things, but that's not what they're there to do. Like, that's also not what they're trained to do. Like, typically speaking, a clinician is going back and to do the mental health work, that headspace work. So, whereas for me, like, especially with the type of coaching that I do, I'm trained specifically in the biology. I'm trained specifically in, well, okay, your nutrition is out of whack. Let's look at you holistically and figure out, what pieces are creating your roadblocks right now to help you navigate through, kind of break through those roadblocks to help you keep moving forward in your journey. And yeah, so I really, um, I kind of get up in arms a little bit about the scope of practice and whether it's peer supporters or coaches or clinicians stepping outside their scope of practice and like trying to do all the things for everybody. And you just can't do that. We're not supposed to be all things to someone. And we need a team of people in this healing journey. And there's a time and a place for a clinician, there's a time and a place for coaching, there's a time and a place for peer support. They each serve different needs. And when people step outside their scope of practice, I think that's where we can get into doing harm a little bit, and we have to be very careful with that. So that's I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Yeah.
some thoughts on it.
No, I love that you said that of, staying in your lane basically, and that we do need to have all of that because one of the ways that what we've been kind of deemed as with coaching is we're kind of the middle ground, the cushion. You have peer support. Peer support serves a purpose. You need to have that, especially for after a critical incident or having somebody in the department that can come and talk to whoever's there. The issue with that is depending on who your peer support person or people are and the others, the officers or the personnel might not trust them, might not like them. If they came up through the ranks with them and saw them kind of at their worst or when they were maybe a little younger or whatever, they're not going to come and confide in that person. Um, they're also not going to come and talk about, hey, I'm going home and drinking too much. Hey, I'm going home and, getting mad at my wife. They're not going to talk. And that is out of peer support's realm, really. That's where you come into coaching and you come into therapy, depending on where you're at with that. We always say that's one of the reasons that we are, networking and talking to so many people is we want to be able to refer. If something comes out of the realm of coaching, we want to have mental health practitioners that we have vetted, we know are supportive of law enforcement, first of all, because there are some people that are very not. We want to know that they can handle whatever that person's coming to them with. So we want to have that big web of connections for people. And then, Chris, you explain coaching like it's basically like FTO. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's my take on it is like field training, right? So when a new officer graduates the academy, they ride for so many weeks with a veteran officer, right? So they can see what a real cop looks like and how a real cop does real cop stuff, right? And that field training officer they teach the officer how to be a street cop, right? And it's very important because as an FTO, you don't want that young officer to not know how to do their job, right? And you definitely don't want that young officer to call you every 10 minutes asking you questions about how to do something. So you train them, you teach them how to do this. And I look at coaching as the same way. Every time I do a coaching session with somebody, I want my client to take something away from it, a coaching technique, right? Because like Karen and Sarah, what you guys both said, you don't want somebody to keep coming back to you, for years upon years. Now, in the corporate world, that's what they want because why? Because the money, right? They want keep them coming back, keep them dependent on you. And that's not what we do, right, as coaches. We wanna give the client something that they can use so they can go out there in the world and enjoy the world on their own. They don't need us, right? And much like you, Sarah, I work with a client only a few and same with you, Karen, only a few times, and eventually I want them to go out on their own. And I told a client this once, I go, "I don't want you to be dependent on me. I want you to be able to go out there on your own," right? And he freaked out. Like, this client actually freaked out. He goes, "Well, can I just keep coming to you?" I go, "Yes, you can, but I just want you to know, be prepared. You're gonna have to go out on your own at some point, right?" So I got him prepared for that, and he did. I mean, few sessions and boom, he was ready to go. But it showed how dark of a place he was in that he was dependent on me, right? And if you're dependent on somebody, that's a problem. That's an issue. So we have to work on getting you back to that balanced state that you're in. And you guys touched on it. We are not the answer all, end all, be all. You come to me, I'm gonna fix all your problems. No, we have to be able to collaborate with other people, other coaching practices, other wellness companies, other, practitioners, counselors, psychiatrists, because yes, we are gonna have to refer people to those other individuals if we have to, if it's out of the realm of our, understanding, right? So anyway,
Well,
hope
and
that made sense.
yeah, no, and that short term, we did that with an entire department where, yeah, in the corporate world, bad for business. We don't have a contract with that department anymore because we did our job. When we started with the department, they didn't have anything for peer support. They had one person that understood that there was a need for wellness and that he was kind of deemed the peer support person. But he was also doing all of his other tasks and jobs, right? So still trying to do all of that. And we came in, we offered coaching, we did training, we kind of helped them understand a few different things. And within 2 years, they have a really awesome in-house mental health practitioner. They have a peer support team. They actually started a regional peer support team for the other departments that also did not really have peer support. And they have an internal structure. They have a new language, new ways of looking at things, ways to handle conflict and communication resolve easier. And, they're always welcome to come back, or if they want to bring us up for something, that's cool. But it's kind of like, you know, we we've graduated, like, yay. So now we get to watch them fly when we can have space to bring on another department. That's kind of what we want to do in our realm. Again, horrible business plan.
Yes.
There's enough need out
Horrible.
there. There's enough need out
Yeah.
there. I mean,
Yeah.
in the dispatch world alone, there's like 5,000 different PSAPs in our country. So,
Chris,
like, there's plenty of need.
there's
Yeah.
more than enough, and what we would like to do, we bring in a department, we work with them, we do our thing, and depending on the size of the department, it might be 2 years that we work with them. It could be, if it's a larger department, it needs to be more like 5, and it might be an ongoing because 'cause you're always having new people, but really, we wanna be able to come in and give the department the tools in-house so that coaching is just it's added, but it's not needed because there's so many departments and people that are just in dumpster fire mode all the time, and it doesn't have to be that. So on that note too, let's kind of talk about how to shift the mindset, do some, simple reframing. When you guys go out and you're talking to departments and different first responders, we all know that everybody focuses on the problem. Coaches focus on the solution. So, what is your experience when it comes to helping people reframe some of their limiting beliefs?
I think it's reminding them oftentimes things that they say. I don't think we really hear what we say. And so it's not reframing, right? It's just reminding them of what they say. And sometimes making little tweaks, right? And I think there's also interpretation, right, of what we're really trying to say. So it's just these little finesses that I find sometimes are really helpful. Um, but I also think that when you give somebody the opportunity to have the time and the space, and I think as a female, I can do things in a way that a man can't, right? Especially because this is such a male dominated field that there's less judgment and ego that I think that I can bring, right? Because I'm just here to listen to what you're saying, kind of interpret what you're really trying to say, and then remind you of things that you've said in the past. And then the next thing is, like I said, how do we, once we get really clear on that, then how do we continue to move forward? And it sounds very simple, but it takes a lot. For me, I've got to be really dialed in um to what you're saying. I'm very present. I say the ministry of presence, right? That is really what I bring to the work that I do in every area is I'm just so dialed in to what you're saying and where we're going that I really have to, and to bring it to, how do you spring clean your energy? It's like, well, I have to be really careful with how often I'm doing that because I am so present. And there are so many tips and tricks that I have. And I can tell you that on shift, it looked a little bit different. I had to get very creative as to how I did that versus my practice. And when you're working in an organization, so I used to work in a wellness unit for a large public safety company, and I was essentially coaching. And I can tell you the expectation of the amount of coaching that I was expected to do was unsustainable for me. I would literally Friday night, I could not talk to anybody. I did nothing on the weekends because I had left everything on the job, and it's so relatable to what you do as a cop, as a firefighter, a dispatcher. And I would say to them, "I can't, this is not sustainable for me." But they had a different idea, right? So when I went to work in that company, I was very intentional as well, right? I knew I was gonna do that work for 3 years or less because I had an idea of how much that was going to take energetically for me, and I was willing to do it. There's a lot of things that shifted and changed, and I made it 2 years. But at the end, I was literally like, "I don't think I can physically sustain this, energetically sustain this." So you know your limits as well, because we're professional helpers, right? We all, as in public safety, you're a professional helper. Most of us are trying to undo that. And so I need to know that I have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, and sometimes it gets very difficult to do that within the organizations that you serve.
And Karen, you're talking about having self-awareness, right? And that's where a lot of our first responders, we are the best problem solvers on the planet, right? You put a bunch of cops and firefighters in a room and we'll solve all the problems of the world, right? And, we'll bring order to chaos within seconds of arriving at a scene. Problem with us is we don't recognize we have a problem. And so we can operate in years in a negative state. In one of the phases that I call duty-driven deterioration, and like what you said, you recognize that. You knew I'm gonna give it at least 3 years, and you gave it 2. But you recognize that it is affecting you. It is affecting you personally when you go home. So what did you do? You disconnected from there, right? And I think if our first responders could figure that out, to be able to disconnect daily, right? Leave Detective Zamora at work. Leave firefighter so and so at work. And now Chris Zamora is going home, right? Start from the very beginning in the academy, right? And that way, throughout your career, you're in that mindset that officer so and so, firefighter so and so is staying at the station, the human being, The dad, the mom, the whatever it is going home now. Me, personally, I'm going home now. And that is something that I did not recognize throughout my career, a majority of my career. Why? Because I'm a cop, right? I'm proud of what I'm doing, and I love what I do, and I'm a cop 24/7, and I get to bring my police radio home with me, and I get to listen off duty at all the traffic, and guess what? I'm not disconnecting, right? I'm not and you're Sarah, you're a dispatcher. You've never taken a radio home and listened to it off duty, I'm sure, right?
No, I've never done that.
I'm not doing that currently, as you go and turn off the radio right now, right?
What?
And
I
and and here's
mean,
and here's when I finally figured that out, like 18 years in, and I said, "No, I'm gonna leave my radio in my locker at work." I was still going home, and guess what I was still hearing? The phantom dispatcher voice. I'm still hearing it because I'm so used to it from 18 years of doing it straight, right? I didn't recognize it, and because of that, I almost quit twice in my career. I almost just walked away from it, not figuring out what is wrong with me, and that's the thing. What is wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I'm different than everybody else because nobody else is suffering, it's only me, right? So I isolated myself throughout that process, and when I questioned that, I isolated myself even more from shame, right? So we have to be able to let officers and firefighters, first responders, 911 operators, dispatchers understand you are a human being. Leave work at work and go home and enjoy your personal life, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I definitely have brought radios home with me while I was in dispatch. I've been out of dispatch for a while, but it doesn't feel like I've been out of dispatch for a while. Your original question was about limiting beliefs and how do we as coaches walk people through their limiting beliefs? And for me, first, like just acknowledging where they're at, figuring that out takes time, energy, and effort. Of course, that's part of being a good coach. While there are patterns, and the more you coach, the more you interact with people, the easier it is to see patterns. Everybody's unique and what their limiting beliefs are, while the limiting belief itself might be a pattern, how it plays out in their life, I think is unique. And so like calling out the best in people is something that I like to do in my coaching and seeing who people are underneath all the layers of junk, like life happening on life's terms and the conditioning and all that, and helping people connect with who they are and who they're here to be, and the gifts and the joy and the abundance in life that is waiting there for them. I think is part of addressing the limiting beliefs.
You had said something too. So meeting people where they are, and that's where how we've been taught, meeting people where they are. It's what we're doing with law enforcement. We're meeting where you are. And one of the things that I realized, because just when you're doing healing work, when you're listening to people, you're holding space, it's energy. Whether you think it's woo woo or not, everything is energy. That's science. You can Google that, whatever. But we can be sponges. If we don't know how to protect ourselves, don't know how to keep other people's stuff from actually like getting into our energy field, it can take a practitioner out, or, peer support too. First responders, you guys are listening to people's crap. You're in their energy field. And so that stuff can stick on you. It can get into you. And now all of a sudden you're kind of thinking differently. You're angry for no reason, not really sure. And so it's really important to protect yourself energetically and learn about different things. And whether that is, your religious belief, maybe you go to church. If you step into a church, some of that stuff just kind of gets knocked off you anyway. If that's not your thing, if church is not your cup of tea, the best thing that I can recommend is saltwater baths, Epsom salt baths. If you're next to the ocean, get in the ocean. Salt water helps cleanse all of that. I think all first responders should be doing saltwater spritzes after every call. um, but meeting the people where they are, you also want to make sure that you are not dropping your energy. You can sit with them logically. You can understand, because one of the reasons that we all do this work is because we've been through some stuff ourselves. Anybody that's in the healing field that's teaching and coaching and mentoring and whatever has gone through something at some point, and they figured out some tools and tricks that worked for them. And it's like, oh, I want to be able to share this. I want to be able to help. It's all of service and passion and purpose, right? But I had I got to meet Lisa Nichols, years and years ago. And for people that don't know Lisa Nichols, she is a teacher and a mentor. She's a great storyteller. She's a coach. She's all of these different things. And I looked at her. I'm like, how do you not let it in? How do you not take in everybody's stuff? She's like, oh, honey, I don't. Like, I don't take anybody's stuff in. I don't need to. And I didn't understand at the time because at the time I was a sponge. I took in everybody's stuff and I was a hot mess. I had to really learn. That's one of the reasons that all these pieces of paper are on the wall is because I had to go learn how to keep other people's crap out of my life. I can hold space for you. So, but I don't need to be in it with you, if that makes sense. So we can meet you where you're at, and I can sit there. I can go into the darkest thing. I'm not going to be scared of that. But I always say misery loves company. I am not company. I am not afraid to go in the dark with you, but I have a flashlight and I know my way out. And more importantly, I don't have a flashlight, I am the flashlight. I know how to get out. So
I really appreciate all of that too because I think in my journey, I started my career actually as a therapist. I'm not trained as a therapist, but that's where I started my career. And I, like you, was also a sponge, and it took me several years of surveying in the community, whether it was through mental health or through law enforcement when I was a probation officer or even in dispatch. And it took me several years to learn how to, and a couple like cycles of burnout as well, of learning how to like put this almost protective bubble around myself. And I like to say now, I was just talking about this with a good friend of mine this morning. We had virtual coffee, and I was like, um, I have this bubble around me that, like, honestly, like, narcissists just kinda bounce off of because like, they can't get anything from me because I don't give anything. And what I was talking with my friend about this morning was, like, people who wanna ride the coattails of the work that I've done, and I don't do that. Like, this is your journey. I'm just here as a guide, as someone to walk with you on your journey, and that's not a two-way street. You're not walking with me on my journey. That's not why you're paying me. That's not why I'm on your team. I am very much on your team to be on your team and in your corner, and I don't need that anything from you. Like, I think that's another piece of when you're working in public safety professionals need us, whether we're peer support coaches or clinicians, to not need anything from them. And to be able to hold our own, like, yes, you can tell me whatever you want. You can unload your deepest, darkest stuff, and I can hold space for that. And like, it doesn't penetrate into me, and sometimes, of course, it does because there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of suffering, and we do have the opportunity as coaches to, and clinicians, I think, do this well, good ones will do this as well, but, like, transmute that darkness into something really light and beautiful and flush it out, like, so we'll hold space for that energy and do our work. That's our responsibility to, like, either let it bounce off of us or to take it in and to transmute, let it flow out of us. And I think yeah, I think that's part of our responsibility. A good coach, a good clinician is going to understand that and is going to be able to hold the space for that. But I'm with you on, I know, like, I think another piece of this is I'm not anchored to my clients' stories. I'm not anchored to them. My anchors are like the healthy spaces, the healthy people, the healthy environments on in my and my team and my support. I'm anchored to them. I'm not anchored to your story. So you can tell me your story and I can look at it from a pretty unbiased, like, unattached, detached perspective. And I think that also helps with not taking in that energy. But that's a journey too. Like, when I do a lot of coaching for clinicians actually. Um and when I talk to them about this whole concept, it's the same kind of stuff comes up. Like, when you're green and you don't know, you just enter into the space and you're like, I just want to help people, and I'm here and I'm well intentioned and I have a good heart and I have light and love inside of me, and I want to bring goodness to the people that are serving others, or I want to serve others. Like, that kind of beauty can get really consumed by darkness very quickly. And so teaching our coaches that are And we were talking about FTO stuff, Chris. I love that analogy of using it as an FTO, like a training, teaching coaches, teaching clinicians how to hold space while also doing your own work so that you don't get taken out by the darkness.
Yeah.
I think is a real piece of this.
Yeah, and you hit a very good point. We're facilitators, right? And I think a common misperception that a lot of people have is that we are healers, and we aren't healers.
Mm.
We don't heal. We facilitate the healing. It's the actual individual that does the healing, right? So you can have a doctor, you go to a doctor because you have whatever, you're sick or whatever it might be. The doctor might prescribe to you some medication or whatever it might be. The doctor is not healing you. You are healing yourself.
Mm.
Your body is healing itself, right? And that's the one of the miraculous things of the human body is it knows how to fix itself. It knows how to
Mhm.
heal itself. It knows how to regain its balance. So as coaches, what we do is we facilitate that healing by asking questions, right? Not giving them answers, not telling them, "Oh, well, this is why you're feeling this way," right? One of the things when I was in I'm also a yoga instructor, and when I was in yoga training, there was a lady in class. Now we not only did we learn about, postures and breath work and all that, but we also talked about the philosophical side of yoga. And there was a lady in class, very nice lady, and she said she grew up very religious, and I won't say which religion, but she goes, "I want to unlearn everything I learned in this religion." And I said, "Whoa, whoa, hold on." I go, "It's very dangerous to unlearn something," right? And I don't think as human beings that we can unlearn something. I don't think it's possible short of having a traumatic brain injury, right? And here's a reason. If we unlearn something, we would never have evolved millions of years into who we are today, right? So, for example, I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, and I told this lady, I said, "You have the world's greatest hypnotherapist in front of you right now. On the count of 3, I'm gonna tap you on the forehead, and you're going to unlearn everything in that church. 1, 2, 3, boom, you've unlearned everything. How great is that, right?" I go, "However, this weekend, there's gonna be 2 missionaries that are gonna come to your house, and they're gonna talk about this religion that you never heard about because you unlearned it, and you're gonna really like what they're saying, and you're gonna send your family to that church. Do you see the danger of unlearning something?" You see, trauma, we can't unlearn trauma, but we can learn from it. It becomes a reference point. How do we not let that happen to us again? How can we help other people that are going through it? You see? So when it comes to unlearning something, I don't think you wanna unlearn. I don't think it's possible for us to unlearn, but we can use it as a reference point, right? Because let's face it, we all have experienced trauma. And, especially police officers, we're trained to remember everything, right? Because years later, we could testify in court. I was retired, 4 years. I hadn't touched a homicide case when I was a homicide detective. I hadn't touched that case in 7 years. And guess what? I'm going to a homicide trial, and now I had to remember everything, right? So, first responders, we're trained to remember everything, remember little details, and so we have to be careful that we don't carry all of that with us. Okay, we experienced it, but how do we use that trauma to help us
Yeah.
and help other people? And I think that's important.
Well, one of my faculty advisors had said something that was very concise, CCQ, which really resonates with me because it's as a coach, it's teach what you know and what you still need to learn. And I'm going to say that again, teach what you know and what you still need to learn because I'm constantly learning new things because I don't have all the answers, right? As a coach, you better be running drills, right? As using your FTO analogy. And so you better have a coach, right? Or mentors. I'm doing in my blog, I'm going to be doing a 3-part series that talks about the difference between therapy and coaching, mentoring and coaching. And there are differences, right? There's a lane for all of that. But specifically as coaches, if we're not continuing to learn what we still need to know. And that's why having you guys, right, is really helpful, right? Because we're consistently learning too, but we've got to continue to unpack all the things. That was the number one thing I heard about when people thought I was gonna be a therapist, right? I had a firefighter say that to me, "Oh, therapists are crazy." I said, "Well," I use it the analogy of, like, actors, right? Just in any profession, you have A-list, B-list, C-list, D-list, right? So you can't really it's very judgmental to kind of lump everybody into one group, right? So that's where it's like, "Okay, where do I have accountability in my life?" Because I'm asking you to hold accountability in your life. And that's very uncomfortable for most people, that accountability component to it, and that's what I think coaching does really well, is we hold you accountable.
Mhm.
And with
Mhm.
that accountability, you can make some really quick improvements to where you want your life and the vision for your family, right? That's something that you kind of have broad strokes in when you start to work with the client, and you just really kinda continue to fine tune that over the course of time. And so it's really important that we continue to learn what we still need to learn.
Uh, something with I was making notes with everything you guys were saying because in the same not unlearning, oftentimes, and I'm sure you guys get this too, that people will come to you and be like, "Can you help me forget?" We don't want to unlearn and we don't want to forget. The thing is, Sarah, as you said, you're not anchored to the story. The problem is, and that's what Karen, you were just saying too, people don't like to take accountability because it's easier to play victim and it's easier to stay anchored to that story and have that because now that becomes part of your personality. And so people themselves are anchored to their story. They're anchored to the trauma. They're anchored to that. But the thing is, this is why I always talk about grounding in gratitude and becoming present. You had a traumatic event happen. I understand, and it's hard, especially if you're in active trauma and it's closer, this doesn't relate to you, but if it's been years, but that story keeps popping up and keep replaying, you're anchored to that story, and because you haven't necessarily done the healing for whatever thing. One of the quickest ways to get out of replaying that story is to be present and look around. And one of the ways to do that is to start looking at what's in front of you and giving gratitude. Like right now, I have a desk in front of me. I'm thankful I have a desk. I'm thankful I'm on a podcast. I'm thankful I'm talking to people. And you start looking and labeling what's around you. And now all of a sudden, you pull yourself back out of that story. You can do different methodologies with different practitioners to you can't forget or unlearn, but you can turn the volume down. You can make it fuzzy. You can pretend like it's right now that story is playing like a big movie screen in front of you and it's just, taking over, mentally hijacking you. But if you work with the right practitioner, you could turn it to a static thing, or you could shrink the TV down, or you could turn the TV off. You have the remote, you're in control of that. These are kind of NLP and hypnosis type techniques, but there's coaches that do these type of things too. It is possible, first of all, to not have it be so blaring in your face. One of the other things we were talking about too is that protective bubble. And I think this is where first responders, where we could all really learn from each other, especially men. I think I wrote down asshole shield. That's just what came to me.
I like it.
So, because we know we have a lot of people that turn into assholes because they are guarded, because they had to shut their feelings down. They had to become desensitized to things. They compartmentalize and they have their guard up, and that is their protective shield. And it comes off like they're an asshole. It's not, it's the way that they've figured out how to protect themselves from all of this stuff. Where you can learn how to protect yourself and not be an asshole about it. It's having that conversation and just, learning a different way. Again, you're not unlearning what you know, but learning some other things. And honestly, that's what started for me. That is actually what got me into coaching is because I used to be an asshole. 100% because I'm so empathic and so intuitive and I was a bar owner and a bartender, so I was a life coach before I was ever a life coach because I was a bartender. But I was an asshole. Like I could listen to people's stories and I'd be like, BS. Like, I would call them on their my perception of their truth, but they hadn't arrived at that awareness for themselves, and so I kind of beat them over the head with it. And so I've been writing a book for years, and someday I'll publish it. It's the FU point. It's that point where you get to like, you know what? F it. And I would get people to be like, F you, like you're a jerk about this. You're right, but you're a jerk about it. And so I'm like, there's gotta be an easier way. That's what led me to the school that, Karen also went to. Um, And I learned about having grace and how to ask questions and guide them to the self-awareness and all of that. So it is completely possible to learn a new way. So to whoever the self-proclaimed assholes are that are listening to this, there's a better way.
Yeah.
Well, I have I like to call cops teddy bears wrapped in asshole.
Yeah.
I just think cops are teddy bears wrapped in asshole, and firefighters are just teddy bears. They're just drunk teddy bears, and then dispatchers are toddlers asking why. That's how I
Sarah, why are you giving away our secrets?
I know.
because people need to understand how to interact with us because like we need help.
It's so funny, Sarah, because I do a lot of work in Gen Pop too, because I said we're making strides in first responder land. But if we've got a mental health crisis, right? So if we're not cleaning up, right, all the calls that I was dispatched to, right, their level. So there's got to be a balance between these two because I was dispatched, to the typical places, right, in Phoenix. So I didn't very much go north in the city, right? It was more Sunnyvale and, you were always consistently servicing people in particular communities. And so I believe that we need to continue to have this conversation in Gen Pop as well, because there is a huge disconnect as to what happens when you're in public safety. The average citizen has no idea that they're even going to be billed if they needed to be transported by an AMBO to a hospital. So there's a huge disconnect here. But I was the salty dog, and I didn't even know, right? But there was this level of, again, you're empathic. When you're in public safety, you are an empath. You have language around this because you have a huge heart. But there's a level of you've got to compartmentalize that. Well, we do that so well. It's for cops, they're screwed because you literally wear a shield over your heart. So if you are not proactively unpacking that and doing things to open that back up, you're going to lose your empathy and your compassion, which is your superpower. And typically, what I loved was when I worked with veterans on the police department, because even though my uniform says fire, I was working with PD more because we were automatically dispatched to infant drownings, GSWs, suicides. And I love that because by my uniform, they knew what I did. And so they would disclose things to me because you're on scene for hours, right? So they knew it was a soft place to land just because of the color shirt that I wore. And I use the analogy of dogs and cats. So cops are like cats. When they brush up against you, and that may happen at once every 6 months, you're fucking in. Firefighters are like dogs. They're jumping all over you all the time. It's like, easy down, boy.
That's awesome.
I can make some good jokes, but I'm not
Equal opportunity, Chris. That's why I love it because I'm like in between the two.
well, uh, well, the compassion part, right? Sometimes we lose our compassion because we just get beat down so much in this profession. And it happens quite often, and I'll tell a quick story, right around my 18th year, I was struggling, right? And I hated I was disgruntled, I hated going into work, I would call in sick all the time, and I was just basically a loose cannon walking around, right? And one day I stopped, I was working patrol, I went, got a drink in this, convenience store, and while I'm standing in line, somebody tapped me on my shoulder, and I turned around and it was a guy all tatted up, just a mean-looking dude, and he looked at me, he goes, "Do you know or did you know, uh, Officer Targos, Rob Targos?" And Rob is a good friend of mine, he was killed in the line of duty, about 10 years prior,
Wasn't yesterday's
and
anniversary?
yesterday was his 20-year anniversary of his death, um, and so this conversation can go really good or it can go really bad, right? He goes, "He arrested me." Right? And I'm like, "Uh-oh." And he goes, um, he was the only cop that ever listened to me. He was the only cop that ever gave me respect, and I've been arrested a lot. And he don't get me wrong, he yelled at me, told me I needed to get my life straightened up and I needed to get off drugs, not just for me, but for my family. But he did it in a way that a dad would talk to his son, and nobody's ever talked to me like that. And so I got locked up. I came out and I heard what happened to him, and I didn't know what to do. So I did this, and he showed me his hand, and he got a tattoo of Rob's badge number and his motor wings because Rob was a motor officer. He goes, I got this tattooed on my hand to remind me every day that there are good people out there and for me to do my best every day. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for your loss. And in a weird way, I needed to hear that day because Rob will never know how he impacted this one man. And I'm sure Rob impacted many lives throughout his career. As every first responder out there listening to this, just know you've impacted people's lives in a positive way. And though you may never know it, much like Rob here will never know it, just know you have. And it was like a message was being sent to me by Rob, like, hey, stick it out, compassion, don't ever lose it. And it really, I took a picture of the tattoo just as so I could share it with everybody. And yesterday was the 20-year anniversary of it all. And so when I go and I talk, I share that story with people, with first responders, especially those who are struggling. Just know we entered this profession to help people. If you lose your compassion, you got to get some help, right? You got to get help. That's an indicator that you're struggling. And it happens. It usually happens to those of us that have the biggest hearts because we want to help everybody. And if you try to help everybody, guess what? You're gonna carry a lot of that weight. So, I just wanted to share that story. I thought it would be befitting to fit for this, episode and the timing of it as well. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Appreciate that because I think that we lose sight of that, because again, it's a helping profession, but it takes a toll, but it doesn't have to. And for me, the passion lies in we're at that cycle where we're retiring, right? So this old guard is moving out. And I no longer really care about the salty dog because I was the salty dog and I needed to figure it out for myself, right? We cater a lot of times to this salty dog. And we've got this new generation coming in to these unbelievably wonderful professions that have no grit and no resilience. But they want to find their purpose. And so it's that balance between the 2 where because what's happening is a lot of times they come into the profession and you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And then a couple years in, they're quitting. Like, "I'm Gen X, honey, we don't quit. I can go hard, and I know I've got enough grit and resilience for 8 people." I wanna protect their hearts, but also understand that you can also do some things to compartmentalize, right? It doesn't have to take the toll that it's taken after 18 years, right? Because if you're consistently doing this, hopefully it doesn't have to end unwell, right? We wanna keep you as solid as you come into the profession.
I think kind of piggybacking a little bit on what you both are saying, I think that rather in language that I would use would be less compassion and empathy and more humanity. Because I think that not every public safety professional gets into it and starts from a place of compassion and humanity. I do, or compassion and empathy, but I do think that what we're all kind of referring to is being anchored into what makes us human and not letting go of that, not losing sight of that. And um So I think I would maybe use different language, but I still think we're talking about something very similar. And then as far as the generation thing goes, I call them the OGs and the young bucks and when I teach. And, the OGs, um, there is a lot of grit and there is a lot of tenacity. And what they built it, blood, sweat, and tears. They built the foundations of what we call public safety today. And they deserve and have earned that honor and respect. And I think the young bucks are coming in, and I actually do think they have quite a bit of tenacity and a different kind of grit than the OGs. No, they are not as weathered, but they have a different kind of grit. Um, and I see it in the emotional intelligence. I see it in their resistance to abuse and toxicity. And that's something that the OGs, they didn't know that it would be okay for them to say, you don't get to treat me this way. And when I travel and teach and I talk to these young bucks coming in that are full of energy, they are full of this vitality, this like, I'm here, I'm gonna serve, I'm gonna go. They also are um, a great example to the OGs of, hey, you didn't have to put up with this. You don't have to put up with it now. And if you don't shift, if the system doesn't shift, I'm going to leave and go work in a system, a different agency that is going to treat me with more respect and understand the value that I do bring to the table. And the other thing that I'm coming across with the young bucks, as I like to call them, is while they're not afraid to push back or push into, like, what you're doing, why you're doing it, they also, are actually pretty open when they get pushed back into. I don't see the same kind of resistance that I do in the OGs, in the young bucks. So I mean, the generation conversation is a whole thing that we could spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about and processing. But, I just wanted to kinda call out the young bucks and the energy that they are bringing to the table too, because, um, we need that energy. We need that as the OGs in the community. We need to be affirmed and validated, like, "Hey, you don't have to put up with that kind of treatment. You don't have to be abused and taken advantage of and neglected by the system, that you're giving your blood, sweat, and tears to." So, um,
I think that's
yeah.
a great point, Sarah. Thank you, because you're right. And I think Tammy and Chris do something amazing in their training, which is they bring up the youngest of the young, right? The newest of the new and the oldest of the old. And they ask each other, give each other advice because I think that it goes back to what I had just said, right? Teach me what I need to still learn.
Mhm,
But there's a level of oftentimes we're catering to the lowest common denominator, and that's an energy suck.
mhm. And that's a
And
leadership responsibility.
yes, and that's where one of the things we've talked about in the past is how if you don't have anything nice to say, there's some fundamentals that still go, there's reasons why they're fundamentals, then just be quiet. So that the people that can receive whatever needs to be for them, right? Because you do have a responsibility. I started to really understand the level of energy that I put out there, right? Good and bad. And one of my faculty advisors, again, one of the things that really landed with me is somebody's on the couch because of you, Karen, because I've done my own damage. And I think we're so busy about our own selves, right? I need to be mindful of how I'm operating in this world because I've done my own damage.
Yeah.
And there's somebody that's in therapy because of me.
I had that. I played the victim from someone for years. They were the villain and I was the victim. And then I did my healing work and moved on and then found out that the 15 years of my story, I was the villain in their story and they were the victim. And I was like, hold on, what? And so we had to coach each other on that and be like, wait, 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 wait. How did that work out? Um, I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. There was a couple things I wanted to talk about. I really like that you say a different grit. And because if you measure the grit and the resilience versus the old school, they're not tough. They're not tough in the same way.
Yeah.
But they are tough in a different way because and here's for leadership to listen, the new generation is absolutely going to question you, and it is not insubordination. That is,
Correct.
look at us. Everything that our generation thought was just fact and true, everything we don't know. We don't know what's up and what's down. The truth is not the truth. What we thought was the truth forever and was fact was like, oh, that was actually not, that's fabricated. We have all been spun so many different versions of life and lies and conspiracy that isn't conspiracy. None of us know what's going on at this point. Everybody's confused. Nobody can trust anything. And the younger generation is coming up learning to not trust and to ask questions and to say, why do we do this? This doesn't work. And so I think one of the things that would be amazing for law enforcement, like what you guys were saying too about, going out and how you're on the street and losing that compassion, or oh, Chris, you said you bring order to chaos. Some do. Some need some coaching to bring order to the chaos. And that's where coaching methodologies come in. If law enforcement agencies were to run all of their people with all the other training that you have, if you threw in a coach approach training, you'd have a very different outcome with the way that your officers handle people on the street. They would know how to answer questions or ask questions. What, Chris?
No, no, go ahead. I'll wait till you're finished.
Okay. Um, well, yep.
Yeah.
What?
Well, no, and for like, I speak a lot about law enforcement because that's what I understand. That's where I'm from, right? And if you think about what does coaching do? Think about doing a high risk stop, right? And for the officers who are listening to this, a young rookie officer they've got a vehicle that they pulled over that chances are there's some armed suspects in that vehicle. A very young, inexperienced officer is going to be yelling commands at them and yelling at the top of their lungs, overly excited because they're scared, right? But does it become a hindrance? Does it become an issue? Yes, because if the people in the car cannot understand the commands, there's a problem there, right? So an experienced officer could come in and say, "Hey, look, calm down. Use your loudspeaker so you don't have to scream at the top of your lungs, and just speak the commands what you want them to do. Everybody in the car, put your hands up. Driver, step out of the vehicle. Passenger, step out of the vehicle." You can use that with a handheld mic versus screaming at the top of your lungs with your voice cracking because you barely hit puberty, right? And nobody can understand what you're saying. And I can tell you, every veteran officer out there has observed this happen, right? At some point, may not have been a traffic stop, could be something else where chaos was happening, right? And for those veteran officers, chances are at one point in your career, you probably did the same, right? And I can say that from experience because yes, that happened to me when I was a young cop because I'm a young officer and chaos is happening, and my thought is I'm gonna control this scene by yelling at the top of my lungs. Problem is, I'm contributing to the chaos, right? And it took a veteran officer to come up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and say, "It's okay, calm down. Let's reset ourselves." And I learned from that experience. So, veteran officers, just know these younger officers, they're looking to you to learn,
Mhm.
right? And yes, you guys are right. This new generation, they're doing something that my generation, Gen X, we've been trying to get them to do for a long time, and that's talk. Communicate and talk about this, process your emotions, right? They know how to do that now, right? So the two generations can work together. Gen Xers can show this new generation how to get physical if you have to, right? How to get aggressive if you have to. And then the young generation, you can show the Gen Xers how to talk, how to communicate, how to process your and by the way, questioning something, why this is happening, don't take offense to that. They're doing that because they wanna improve the process. They wanna understand it and make sure it makes sense to them, and that's great. That increases the level of professionalism within the agency. So you want them to ask questions, right?
Mhm.
Because in my generation, you don't ever ask questions. Why do we do this? Because we've always done it that way. Okay.
As I said, so
Yeah. Never question your FTO, right? So anyway,
well, on that note, I want to be mindful of your guys' time and in true fashion, go around. If somebody were to just tune into this last part, what is your 2-second mic drop moment, the piece of advice for the audience that your takeaway?
I don't know if I have a coaching tips per se, but my mic drop is that healing is the hardest work you will ever do and the best choice you'll ever make.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
I'm gonna put it on a challenge coin.
Oh,
That's my business philosophy. That's one of my coaching philosophies.
love it. Thank you,
Mhm.
Karen.
And I think for me, it's just never too early or too late to start to do something differently.
Mhm.
That's just a life lesson, right? One of the things I love about the profession is that we're constant learners, right? You're constantly training. And that serves us really well in the job, and it can serve you extremely well in your life.
Great. Chris?
I would say it's okay to talk. It's okay to talk and process some of the stress that you're going to deal with in law enforcement. Not only do it for yourself, but do it for your family, and then also do it for the community that you're protecting, right? Because you got to be good up here in your head if you're going to be able to help anybody. So it's okay to talk. It's okay to reach out. Trust me, you're not alone when you're dealing with stress because it's just the profession that we're in. You're going to be dealing with stress daily.
And my last little bit, going back to what Karen had said a while ago about, officers, you're wearing an actual shield over your heart to protect your heart, but that's also blocking out anything. And that could be blocking energy and love and compassion in your heart. And so I just was thinking about this. I don't know. So here's the thing. If you're somebody listening to this, I'm asking you to be the guinea pig because I have no idea if this would work or not. But if it does, please let me know. Because what I'm thinking is if you remove that shield, you take your vest off when you go home before you walk in the door, do a stretch. If you do yoga, you open your heart up to the sun or whatever, but stretch and kind of open up that channel, open up your heart before you go home. Maybe even like kind of like Care Bear stare. Younger generation doesn't know what that is, but Care Bear stare. Open up your heart and kind of, tap it, just shake some of that negative stuff off and visualize you have an open heart so that when you walk into your house, you're open to your family, that you're able to receive them and give them love, and you are not shut down and guarded from them. And it could be that simple of a stretch and a move and just like, okay, I'm removing that shield away, that block from my heart. I'm open. I'm walking into my house with love. And you don't have to do anything, you don't have to say anything, but just notice if their energy and how they receive you and how you receive them might be a little bit different. Again, don't know if that's going to work, but everybody's shaking their head. That might be a thing. So try it and then let us know. So, on that note, thank you all for tuning in, and until next week.